Hello, this is Jeff Robertson with Penton Audio USA. And this is part 2 of the two-part tutorial video series on explaining the differences between the two message player components found in the IDA8's ATIS Studio software. Please make sure you have viewed the previous videos before this two-part series that described how to do audio message file management and the basic message player setup before viewing either of these two videos, as it is assumed at this point that you're already familiar with the file management portions of the message player setups. As described in part 1 of this series, there are two types of DSP message players that you can use in your design, the multi-message and the single message player components. This video, part 2, will explain how to use the single message player and all of its features and functions. So let's begin. The single message player can be found right where the multi-message player is, right under message in the DSP main component list. If we expand the message tree out, you'll see the MM player, which is the multi-message unit, and the single message player. So if we drag a message player in here, it gives us several options to set up the message player. Now remember, in the multi-message unit, it just came in with 8 logic triggers and 2 audio outputs, and that was it. You didn't have any options. The single message player does have options, and the options are as follows. The CR pin is the clear or reset pin, and you can elect to have that pin on your message player or not. The IR is the interrupt pin, and you can choose to have that logic pin on your component or not. And then the pause pin is another pin that you can elect to be shown on your component. The input and the output are just the logic input triggers, and you can enter the number of different logic triggers that you would like. And the output channel is actually the output triggers if you want to do other subsequent logic programming along with playing the message. We will stop this because I already have a message player entered in here. I have 2 logic input channels, 1 and 2. I have the clear and reset pin shown and the interrupt pin shown. Pauses are commonly used if you have other messages or audio or pages going and you have messages that are repeating throughout the day. Then what you can do is you can actually have the page audio trigger a logic output that would trigger the pause in your message player. So that way when the pages are going, instead of ducking and losing messages, it actually pauses the message player and then picks right back up where it left off so they don't lose any audio information. Without further ado, let's open up the single message player. I open it up. The first thing you have to do is actually create the message event. And there is only one event in the single message player. Remember, in the multi-message unit, you had 2 events because you have 2 audio outputs and you can string multiple files together to make one big message. We will click Add. And we have Event 1, and we will name this Shuffling, and we will give it an audio file to play. Now, just like in the multi-message unit, you'll go to the same window. We want to make sure we are in the machine portion of this, and we will select the 3-tone gong. Now, just like in the multi-message unit, I can add subsequent audio files to a single message event. I will go here and I will say Shuffling. Make sure we're in the machine. Click Shuffling, and there we go. Another function within the single messaging unit is that with each single audio file, I can actually select how many times I want that audio file to play before it moves on to the next file. I will leave it for 1 right now, but if I left it for 1 or for 2 or 3, it would play the 3-tone gong 2 or 3 times. Then it would move on to play the next audio file, the shuffling. The idle in seconds is actually the time between the audio files that it plays. Remember, in the multi-message unit, it played one right after another to make a coherent long message. With this one, you can play multiple messages and add seconds of space between each audio segment. So we will say nothing between the gong and the shuffling, but we will say 1 second from the shuffling before it goes back to do anything else, such as if we tell it to repeat twice, there will be a 1 second pause between the repeats. So that's all we need to do for that. So now we've created our event. Now we can add other events, and let's just say Delta, and we can select the message file that we want for the Delta, just like we did before. There's Delta flight number 1242, and it's departing from a new gate, and we will add that, and that would be A31. And if we leave these zeros, it would play it just straight on through And at the end one, let's say we'll put a 2-second pause, and there you go. So now we can have multiple events. The key is when you assign these events to the triggers, it's only going to play one event at a time. So let's go now from the events to the trigger tab. Here is our 2 channels of trigger. If we had all of the triggers, we added 6, you'd see 6 channels and you'd see 6 trigger nodes, but we only had 2. So let's just start with the number 1. All the events that you created in the events tab would be listed here. So let's do the shuffling. Just for fun, let's add the delta as the trigger number 2. The key is the multiple message unit will play multiple messages at the same time, up to 2. The single player will only play 1 at a time. Even if you have 8 triggers, 8 different message events, it will only play 1 at a time. It cannot do multiple ones because, as you see here, it only has 1 output for the audio. Some big differences also in the single message player from the multi-message unit is you have these other options concerning or detailing how you want the trigger function to operate. It defaults to forever, which means is whenever trigger 1 is triggered or channel 1 is triggered, this message in its entirety with all the audio files associated with that event will play forever until we clear or reset it or interrupt it. And we can decide how and when we want to be able to interrupt that by just clicking on this link under times. So I will click here, and as you will see here, we got a couple others interrupt settings, a couple of options here. One is this is the default to all the messages in the message player. If I set this interrupt to enable, then what that means is I will take this out so you'll see how it looks normal. If the interrupt is enabled, that means I will be able to interrupt this message anytime it's playing by either opening up the contact closure to trigger it or discontinuing the trigger, breaking the contact, or sending a logic trigger to the interrupt or IR pin, or sending a trigger to the CR or clear and reset pin. Now, if I have this enabled, then I can actually say, well, maybe I don't want to be able to stop it in the middle. I only want to interrupt it after it plays the current audio file. Well, to do that, we can add a qualifier. So let's say after it plays once, or we could say after it plays twice, or during the second and on, I want to not be able to interrupt it, and it's going to be within the 2 times or past that time. So if it's within the first one, I will not be able to interrupt this file. So we will say yes, and we will close this, and we will compile, and we will store. Okay, and we're back online. Now, to demonstrate this, I have it just like I set it up in the multimeter. I've got my logic controls that I can trigger manually here, and I've got some meters so we can see what's going on with the logic. There we go. And logic number 1 will actually trigger the message to play. Logic number 2 is actually the clear and reset, and logic number 4 is the interrupt signal. So like we said, if we play it once, it'll keep playing forever, and we have interrupt enabled. And I can stop it. I can stop it manually like that because interrupt is enabled. I can play it again. Now I can come in with my number 4 and actually do the interrupt this way with another contact. And see, at the interrupt, it will actually finish playing at the end of the file because we were in the second one, which was the key. And then once everything's reset. The clear and reset, no matter what you set for interrupt, enable, or disable, the clear and reset will always stop the message where it is and reset the machine. And we can simulate that by doing right here on pin number 2. And then we're reset, ready to go. That is setting it up with or interrupt enable. So let's go offline. We will go back into the same message. We'll go to the trigger, and this time we are going to set the interrupt to disable. And if I set the disable, I can set the enable, and we could say within 2. This means that whenever everything is set so I cannot disable this message, I want it to keep going and keep going and keep going until I get a clear and reset signal. But I do want to give them an out in case of a false alarm And so if the global interrupt disable is selected here, then that means that we can interrupt the message playing within this number of times that we put here. And just to show you what that means is I could add this, and if I say, okay, since it's forever, it says 1 to 65,000 and some odd, but if you put, say, repeat 3 times, then it would have 1 to 3 here. But we'll just say if within the first 2 times it's playing, I want to be able to interrupt it, then that's what's going to happen there. This is the difference on that. We'll compile and store. And we will enable, go online. All right, open this back up. And now you'll see we will play this, and it will play. If I'm within the 2, I can stop it. There you go, just by opening up the contact. The same would play as if I did an interrupt. And sorry, I hit 3, but if you hit 4, it stops it. And everything's fine. So let's let it play past the 2 times, and let's see if we can interrupt it now. Since we set the global interrupt disabled. Now we're playing the second time. Now I should not be able to stop the message by breaking it. It's still playing. Now even if I hit the interrupt pin, number 4, it's still going to play. I cannot stop this by interrupting it. The only thing I can do at this point is I have to hit the clear and reset, which is number 2. Now the message player is reset. So that is the big difference between the single message player and the multi-message player, is I have all of these interrupt features and functions and times and everything like that. If I go offline, one last feature we could do with the message player, instead of having it play forever, we'll go offline, is we can actually dictate how many times we want this trigger message to play. If it's forever, there's no enter number of times here, but if we take it off of play forever or continuous, we can actually enter in the number of times we want that message to play. So if we say 2 right here, and we'll make sure the interrupt is disabled, and we don't need to do that because we always want it to play twice whenever the message is triggered to play. So we've got it set for twice. Let's compile. Let's store. All right. And we'll go online. Now let's play it. I'll leave it triggered, and it should only play twice and stop on its own.
Everything I'm shuffling. Everything I'm shuffling.
And you see it stopped on its own even though the logic is triggered. We'll turn this off. And as you can see in here, we also had the trigger for that. The interrupt is disabled. So that should mean we should be able to play this and even break this contact in the middle of playing, but it's still going to play twice. We'll break it. See, logic is gone, but it still plays its 2 times and then it's done. So I hope that helps clear you up on the differences between the multi-message player and the single message player. And remember, you can bring as many single message players into the system that you want. There really is no limit. You have 2 multi-message players you can bring in and as many single message players as you want. Thanks again. Have fun with your message players and the tons of features and options that you have. I suggest you just play around with it like we're doing here to get used to it. Thank you very much and have a terrific day.